And Susanna Peterson, Director, UNEP DTU, and you've been on stage once before today, United Nations Environment Programme at the Technical University of Denmark.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. So, turning to the businessmen in the middle here, the big bad wolves. What's in it for you? Why this focus on this green revolution, hopefully? Carl?
Yeah, I mean, I'm then one of them. I'm not used to being, sitting in such a situation. But okay, I will try to do this.
Yeah.
But I mean, representing then White, being an employee-owned firm, architect firm with about 800. We are big in that sense, I would say. But for us, it's really about what our employee wants. They are really eager to work with those issues, and I mean to attract new people, the best people. I mean we need to address those questions. So for us, it's coming from our owners. They want us to invest in those issues.
Your stock owners?
Stockholders.
Yeah.
That happens to be the people working in the firm then.
Yeah.
And then of course also to attract new talents into the company. So, yeah, it's about survival.
And I suppose that your clients want it as well, because otherwise it wouldn't be particularly successful.
Of course, I mean, clients, but I mean, it's really, I think we have been working with those issues for a long time, so it's not something that now we can see everyone is talking about it, but I believe it's been a long time investment in order to understand the issues.
Yeah.
So it's the way forward, the way to survive and attract the best talents.
Yeah. And for you who don't know of White Architecture, largest architectural firm in Sweden at least.
Yeah, and Scandinavia maybe.
Scandinavia maybe?
Depending on how you count those big technical consultants. But
Norman Foster's in the house. Is he bigger than you?
He's definitely bigger.
Okay, but
Yes.
not all that much bigger, right?
No.
No. Good. What's in it for you?
And we are a model company who have worked with some values since '65, and those values are that we should give back to the society what we take from the society, and when it comes to environment, we have realized that we also have to look at that when it comes to environment. And therefore we have developed a sustainability strategy 2030, which sets some ambitions on how we should work with carbon neutrality. Our ambitions there is that by 2030 we are a 100% carbon neutral company, and that 50% of the carbon in our supply chain has been taken away. And we do this because we think it is needed. It is needed for the society, we all know about that. But we also believe that we will, in the near future, see a lot of requirement on companies on the CO2 emissions. That could be taxation.
Before you go into that, carbon neutral by 2030. Was that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, and then you said something after that. Half of...
Well, when we talk about carbon emissions, you have to focus on three scopes. Scope 1 and Scope 2, that is what is going on within your own company. And then you have Scope 3, that is what is going on upstreams. That is what you get from your sub-suppliers.
Yeah.
So we manufacture windows, and when we manufacture a window, we can take control of all the energy used when we manufacture the window. But we buy glass, and we buy aluminium, and we buy wood. And that is not within our responsibility, the CO2 emissions from those materials. But we have taken the decision that we will discuss with our sub-suppliers to reduce 50% in their production.
Okay.
So it's the supply chain we will reduce the 50% in. And for our own factories, we will reduce all the emissions by energy efficiency, and then by using renewable energy as power for the factories.
Okay, and your aim, as far as I'm informed, is to actually, the whole history of Velux, which goes back to
1942.
1942. I mean, you're supposed to be carbon neutral from 1942 and onwards.
Yes, our owners has decided that that we should pay back to the society what we have taken from the society when it comes to carbon emissions. So we have calculated all our own carbon emissions from 1942 until today, and then we have calculated our carbon emissions from today until 2030, where we are 100% carbon neutral. So in this period, we have a certain amount of carbon emission. This carbon emission we would like to pay back to the society through a number of forest projects that we are doing together with WWF.
Per, what's in it for you?
In 2015, two things happened. The first thing was, of course, that the Paris Agreement was signed, and secondly was the SDGs. And that changed our mindset. We understood that we need to do something else. And when we deep dive into the SDGs, we didn't decide, we're going to fulfill 1 or 2 or 3. We saw that circular material flows will support the majority of them. So how can we become the company that supports the transition to a circular economy? And one example I hold here in my hand, and that started in 2015. This is calcium carbonate. This is a filler. Today, in a linear economy, you mine it through limestone, dig it up from the bedrock, incinerate it, and then you produce it. It's a high carbon emission product. We have developed a solution where we will use carbon dioxide to put into the ash mountains of Estonia, and by that producing calcium carbonate, that it will have a carbon negative effect. The total climate potential is just for the calcium that are in stockpiles since the 60s in Estonia, or 400 million tons of reduction. That's 8 times as much as Sweden as a nation emits. But this is just one example that we have developed. We have not built a factory yet. We're in the environmental permit process. And the bigger challenge now is European Union tends to say that, well, carbon dioxide shouldn't be used. We should store it under the seabed. So this factory that can restore the land in around Narva might never even happen, depending on what the policymakers do. But of course, a window frame company, they need fillers. A flooring company need it. So Tarkett on a global level has decided to support this.
The floor producer.
Source.
Okay. You kind of lost me at hello. I must admit. But I guess the rest of the audience understood. Did you? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, sorry, it's just me being dim. Susanna Pedersen, you understood what he was saying. You work at the Technical University after all.
Well, I'm not a technician or engineer myself. In fact, UNEP DTU partnership is working to help emerging economies, developing countries in their low carbon transition. And then we are engaged with implementing UN Environment's climate and energy strategy. So we work, of course, on their mandate as well, together with our academic, partners and researchers of DTU and other areas. And I think today it's really interesting to hear your stories, and as a Nordic citizen I'm also very pleased to see many great Nordic companies coming out with great ambitions. You can hardly open a newspaper even before COP without seeing net zero targets and ambitions of Nordic companies. I think the worry is, of course, whether we're talking about greenwashing. Is it true and deep green ambitions? Because one of the challenges at this point is whether there are sufficiently transparent reporting systems that are sort of universally recognized, so you can actually hold companies accountable for their targets, and you can see how they're progressing.
Doesn't that really exist today? Aren't they reliable?
There are a number of initiatives, etc. But I think it's also very different from sector to sector. There are no sort of real, universal standards just yet. So we are, of course, relying a lot on the company's own reporting. Yeah. which is, I'm sure, fine in many cases, but in other cases you can definitely, if you add up all those commitments from companies, you would think that we are closer to the 1.5 degree target, but our company, UNEP DTU, we produced and curated the UNEP emissions gap report that came out last week, where it's shown that even with all the NDC pledges from countries and pledges from companies, etc., we are more on a trajectory of 2.7 degree target and not a 1.5. So I would welcome very much ambitions and also realization of those ambitions.
Emma, is this your picture as well? That you hear all these fantastic, almost utopian stories, and then you're sitting there thinking that, God, why doesn't things happen faster then?
Well, I think the very easy question to why things don't happen faster is it costs money. It costs a lot of money.
But you can earn money from it too, I suppose. Otherwise, you three wouldn't be here, right?
Well, actually, before this debate started, because we're enthusiastic people, we already started talking about this. And as Susanne says, like right now with the trajectory we have, even though we have lots of companies with big ambitions, like your companies, Ørsted and so on, we're still way too high up on the way we're scaling right now. And my issue is, and I think just it's a personal belief, I really do think the companies want to do the best. The issue is just right now, it's extremely expensive to do the best. And what company is going to make those decisions that might put their company into having a worse business, not making as much money, jeopardizing, when it's that expensive and you're not 100% sure if the customer is going to choose it. So for me, I think all companies can have big, brilliant plans and they want to do the best. But until we get a big CO2 tax, I have a hard time seeing it. And I agree with Susanne, because the issue is it's extremely hard to actually look at a product and its whole cycle and and assess it. Like if you look at wood, which is probably one of the most pure products and doesn't have as many different things it goes through, it's almost impossible now to still track where wood comes from if it comes out of certain areas of Europe. Like we import lots of wood that we have no idea what forest it comes from. Is it coming from an old growth forest in Poland, or is it coming from another place in Poland or in Asia? So I think until we get more transparency and better ways to actually life cycle analysis, better ways to assess what the impact is, and actually also counting every single step of the way into it, and the CO2 tax, I have a hard time seeing us meeting that goal with only the ambitions of companies like yours.
Okay, Carl.
Yeah, I agree with you that, of course, we need support from taxation sometimes, like that. But I also believe that there is some sort of positive tipping point happening now when investors, private investors, are looking into how sustainable the companies are that they are investing in, and that is. I mean, we all rely somehow, I guess, on private investments also. I mean, as an architect, I mean, we are working with developers who are financing their buildings with from banks and other investors. And if those investors are valuing the products, the buildings, from a sustainable point of view and giving different rates on the interest out of how sustainable they are, it is money for the investors into this, and then that will support. But I'm not saying we don't need the taxation, but I think it will work together.
Emma and then Susanne. Yep.
I'll say it very quickly, and I know that's probably the most provocative point I could make in a business talk, which is still we have to look at the growth paradigm we're having as well, because we can't keep producing forever. And I think a big thing that's also a part of when we are producing, we have to produce better so it actually keeps holding. Like if you look at buildings, for example, because we're talking about cities, right now we're building things that only last 30 years. And even if that concrete we're using can lock in CO2, if it's going to be ripped down in 30 years, it's a waste again, and it's also polluting. So I think there's a lot of different issues in it. And still, like even if a company is assessing all the different products, right now it's almost impossible to actually really assess a product. It's so hard.
So but the computer power is there to do that, I suppose. It's a matter of just getting the right people behind it. Susanne?
Well, maybe building on what Emma just said, the building sector is one case in point where certainly the public sector can play a role in setting standards, setting demands, etc. If you look at the magnitude of buildings being built at the moment, one New York is being built in the developing countries per month. And in China alone, one New York is built in China every month. This is the amount of new buildings that are going up in the world. And we have representatives of the building sector here. Certainly the public sector controls a lot of public buildings. That they control the planning, the zoning, the building permits. They can impose requirements for low carbon, let's say, neighborhoods. And there are all kinds of things that the public sector can do.
What you're requesting here is higher taxes or penalties,
well,
or
maybe just building code standards, requirements in public procurement, where then the suppliers, like companies, can then be guided into certainly meeting those targets. Whether they would do it anyway, I don't know, but at least if the public sector sets strict requirements, it will force companies to comply.
yeah, more penalties, right?
No, not more penalties.
Higher taxes.
The innovations are already there. We can build very with low carbon emissions, but exactly, we need procurement. We need to make sure that especially the public sector takes a stand and say, we need to do that. And in Sweden last week, the Swedish government changed one word in the legislation. Instead of should, they changed it to must. Must take in consideration CO2 in procurement. And that small change will make that Tarkett that will buy this calcium carbonate, the filler, replaced with a high emission carbon filler, will have a benefit. And furthermore, Tarkett's plan is not to waste the flooring in the long term. They will take them back after 30 years, use them again. So they are developing a flooring that can be used forever. So suddenly this calcium carbonate will be stored forever.
But the fact that they tear that building down after 30 years, I mean, that's the main issue, right?
But that's also part of the procurement process. So when you're remodeling, then you need to make sure that how you tore it down need to be regulated. So that's of course also the policymakers to make sure that that is priority. And especially if then a company like Tarkett can offer that service, then that should be, of course, mandatory to do.
Carl knows this, I think, but what I've heard, most buildings being torn down is because of social reasons rather than age.
I can't say if it happens definitely, but I mean, I would say there are quite a few buildings that are going down for issues like low ceilings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's what I mean by social reasons. Yeah. Kurt, you were waving your hand.
Yeah, and I have two comments to the discussion we have had. I would like to go back first to Susanne's comment about traceability and security of what company promise is also what they deliver. So we should avoid greenwashing. And one of the things that we can do here is to sign up to different ambitions. For instance, Velux have signed up to the Science-Based Target Initiative. And to sign up to that, you have to be controlled, so there cannot be any kind of greenwashing when you sign up to the SBTI targets.
Is that a Danish thing or no?
No, that is not a Danish thing. Okay. That is a very international thing.
So an appropriate question here to Ragn-Sells and White is, have you signed up to this?
We have not.
We have not set the SBTIs yet.
But you're planning to do so?
The thing is that we are not producing products. We are producing raw materials and give services primarily. And it's not really fitted at the moment, but we are, if it's possible, we will do it.
Is White planning to do so?
We are evaluating it, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
And well, it was a little bit of a challenge here, wasn't it? But we see that more and more companies signed up to the Science-Based Target Initiative. Around 2,000 have signed up now. There's a small majority of those from the construction sector. So we need to grow this in the construction sector. And what you sign up to is the 1.5 degrees target. It's the Paris Agreement. So you sign up to that your company is in line with the agreement that was made in Paris to reach the 1.5 degrees target. So we should have companies to sign up to that. And when those companies have signed up to that, I think we can be sure that we are not talking about greenwashing because others are evaluating you.
Okay.
Then to the second thing, which as a matter of fact also come from Susanne, we need to build as much as we have built today between now and 2060, meaning that we need to double all the buildings that we have already in that period. And if we do not look into embodied carbon in building material in that process that we are going to have now, we will simply not reach the 2050 targets. So therefore there is an urgency that authorities and governments and others set requirement to ambitious CO2 emissions from buildings during their lifetime. And if we do it during their lifetime, we will take into consideration the sourcing of the material, we will take into consideration the manufacturing of the material, we will take into consideration the design of the building, we will take into consideration the use of the building, the energy we use in the building, and then in the end of the day we will come back to you and say, can you take care of our products because now they are end of the life, and you will then have to work with them again. And that is what is needed. And all new buildings should meet those requirements. And unfortunately, we have not seen it yet. We have seen it in a few countries, but this needs to grow. And that is why it's good for the construction sector to be here at COP26. We need to show the way.
It's odd, isn't it, that the construction sector hasn't always been present at this event. We were hearing before that this is the first time that one talks about buildings to the extent as one does now since 2015. Susanne, a quick reply maybe to what Kurt said, and then Per, and then Emma.
No, I think Kurt is right that it's about the whole life cycle. We know that buildings stand on average 70 years, but certainly we see that a lot of new build is happening everywhere instead of maybe renovating existing buildings, introducing some of the more efficient technologies into existing buildings, because the the embodiment of carbon is certainly quite large. So if you release all that by just tearing down buildings, it's a problem. So it could be worthwhile to really look at the full life cycle and setting again maybe from let's say public authorities sometimes also requirements that you can just not tear down buildings. In the neighborhood where I live in Denmark, at the moment there are tons of new house owners buying new houses. The first thing they do is that they take a perfectly nice house, tear it down and build something new. It may be more modern, it may be also,
they refurbish the kitchen.
Refurbish or whatever, but people don't refurbish new houses. They just tear them down and build something new, and that is not very good for the environment.
Coming quickly back to the carbon emission question. We emit totally in our company 70,000 tons annually. But our contribution at the moment is plus 1 million tons. That means that we recirculate material that we can avoid digging up somewhere else. We have set a target to double that sum to 2030 and reduce, of course, our own carbon emissions by at least 50%. But here we are dependent on what kind of trucks will there be out there when we transport things. What kind of systems are there in the society? So we can't do that reduction by ourselves. But the contribution is really that we create material that are needed. And one example is the collaboration we do with DTU. In 2018 we became the example for innovation and leadership for the SDGs, and were invited to UN and present in New York for our phosphorus innovation. But the majority of the leftover in the phosphorus process, when we recycle it from sewage sludge, are silica. That silica have we together with DTU investigated, and that can replace cement in concrete production. And that's a very good example of how we suddenly, from what has been 100% waste, is no longer in the future, it will not be any waste. And those type of processes are that we are developing. And one other example, just quickly, we do that with City of Copenhagen, and it will be inaugurated here in the spring, is that we will extract nitrogen directly from the wastewater, avoiding it to go up as laughing gas emissions. And that's a huge carbon emitter that nobody talks about at the moment.
But the fact that you have a turnaround of billions krona, aren't you in a position, just like Kurt, to say to your truck drivers, we're not accepting things, you have to have a carbon-free whatever?
The problem is that the innovation, the trucks are not there yet.
No? Okay.
We have just signed a contract with, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but we are setting up a factory in Stockholm that will convert fly ashes into valuable resources as well.
Okay, fly ashes?
Fly ashes from waste incineration. Okay. And today it has been landfilled. Okay. Majority of the ashes today goes to an island in Oslo Bay where they are putting it into the hole.
Wow.
But we have developed a solution where we can extract the elements from the fly ashes, and we will transport the fly ashes with electric trucks. So we're setting up the new system with no carbon emissions at all.
But couldn't you just say that we're going to use electric trucks?
It is not enough trucks.
Okay.
It is not enough, so we need to change the infrastructure in society.
Okay, because that's the goal that Oslo has set for itself. That
exactly.
It's going to be a carbon-free construction
and we will be the first one to support Oslo with that.
Okay. Emma.
Well, I have two things I would like to question, actually, when I've been listening to all your clever words and your amazing innovations.
But they seem sincere.
I do not doubt them in any way.
Good.
But I actually do wonder, Pierre, when you say you don't want any more penalties. But if you're going to change the words in the law from should to must, how can you make sure that the companies actually follow that? One, I would like to ask that. And then I hear that you're all taking a lot of responsibility and giving back to your local communities where you're from. But the thing that we don't talk about, which is that carbon emissions and climate change does not affect the place where we live that much as it does the rest of the world. So all of the carbon your companies have emitted actually affect the global south way more, and their livelihoods and so on. Have you guys thought about how you can actually do some of this sustainability work there where it's hit the absolute hardest from your carbon emissions? Like, does it matter that much that you build another forest in Denmark? It's much more important you do something down there where they can become actually climate migrants.
Everybody wants to ask you, but Per.
Yeah, I can very quickly. Yes, it is extremely important, but is the carrot or stick the most effective tool? We have a problem. When we talk about the phosphorus, we're not allowed to put it back into circulation because European legislation says, well, it has been waste that is not possible to use. The same, we're now setting up a nitrogen factory that will avoid the emissions of laughing gases. But the European legislation says, oh, sorry, it has been waste, you can't use it. The same with the potassium that we will extract from the fly ashes. So
but do you honestly think that things will happen just because the government says must instead of should?
Exactly, that's the question.
That has to be followed up by something, right?
Yeah, but we are investing, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Even if the legislation are against us.
It's fine that you three are doing well, but like you're a minority of most of the Nordic companies. How would they ever do anything if there's not actually a penalty for it? That's my question.
And you must have a must. And of course you need to have a consequence if it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Totally.
Carl.
Yeah, I would answer then on this question. I mean, what do we do in other countries? I mean, being outside of Sweden for us, for instance, in Nairobi where we are doing projects, it's also to give some new knowledge there, but it's also to learn out of what we... This works better?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
If we can get the microphone going out here.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Maybe? Yeah?
No?
No?
Mm.
So, right?
Have to open.
But then I can answer why we
are getting the microphone up.
Smart move. Smart
Carl,
move.
You're on now.
Am I on? Okay. No, I mean, being outside of Sweden and doing things, for instance, in Nairobi, then that helps not only to give our knowledge in Nairobi, but it's also for us important to learn out of the context down there, because I don't think we have all the answers in our home environment. So we need to be in other places and share knowledge.
Definitely.
And that's one way of also respecting and exporting in a way.
While I've got you on the line, oh Christ, I got my own sound really loud. White, do you ever say no? Do you ever say, no, we're not doing a building for you because we do not agree with your policies?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Example, please.
No, but I mean, looking outside of Sweden, I mean, there are definitely both regions and projects that we are not working with. I mean, we are being approached by working with airports in various places of the world. I mean, and that's a no-go. And there are other projects in that definitely we are not working with. And then, so yes, it happens.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I would like to follow up on the discussion we have now, and then I would like to come back to the global south. But talking about incentives and regulations, I think the most important thing is to set regulations on carbon level in buildings. So set a level for how much carbon are you allowed to have per square meter in a building in its lifetime. That would set requirements to the architects and the engineers and the consultants that they need to meet, and they will then have a tool to go to the customer and say, I cannot build this for you, you have to do it better. We have learned from the past that energy efficiency, we have developed very energy efficient buildings in the Scandinavian countries. We have done that because we have requirement to energy efficiency. But that is only a small part of a building's lifetime. And now we need to look at the whole lifetime of the building, and therefore we have to switch from legislation that is about energy and energy efficiency to legislation that is maximum carbon per square meter in a building's lifetime. That will drive a development, and we have done that in Denmark now, and I know that other countries are also going to look into this. Then to the other question.
When you say we've done it in Denmark,
we will in Denmark introduce from 2023 all buildings which are above 1,000 square meter must maximum have a CO2 content of 12 kilo per square meter.
Okay, a quick reply from Emma there.
A quick reply from me. It's a bigger question, so maybe you should let him finish.
Okay then.
But I can also.
And from 2025, it is not only buildings above 1,000 square meter; it's all buildings. And when we come to 2029, the level is not 12, the level is 6. So we will, in that period, bring the carbon emission from buildings down from 12 today, which is also ambitious, down to 6 in 2029 in Denmark. So we are extremely ambitious on that level. And that is the switch we need to take, because then architects and engineers and others will be forced to design buildings to that level, and they will have a tool to say to the customer and the client, I cannot build this for you because you do not fulfill the requirements.
While I got this question in my mind, do you think that the 1.5 degree vision is possible to realize?
Yes, of course I should believe in that. Why shouldn't I?
Okay.
And I think we can we can do it in the construction sector if we do, like I mentioned before, set requirement to maximum carbon emission, and then we can calculate back to the Paris Agreement and the 1.5, and then we can see where we should be.
Okay,
in order
because
to get there.
Everything actually points in the wrong direction, right?
You said
everything points in the wrong direction. I mean, if we continue like we're doing, we won't reach that goal.
If we continue like we're doing, it points in the wrong direction, yes.
Yeah.
But then I would like to come back to your comment about are you doing anything in the Global South? And I would like to mention that the lifetime carbon neutrality that Velux has introduced, where we are paying back the CO2 we have emitted since we were founded, that is in total 5.6 million tons of CO2. That is done in forest projects in Global South. We do that together with WWF. We have a partnership with them, and we pay them to make forest restorations and to grow new forest in the Global South. And WWF decide where shall we do it, or where is it best to do it. And in that way we pay back to the society through forest projects in Global South.
Well, speaking about forests, if I can continue, especially when you are producing raw materials, sorry, I'm a bit tired, it's been a long cup already, and extracting raw materials, there's also a big issue not only with climate, but especially also biodiversity-wise and looking at nature. And it's not something that's talked as much into big corporations, but in the future, and if you look at the EU biodiversity strategy, it will be coming within the next couple of years. So we don't only have to be forefront thinking in climate, but also biodiversity. How are you thinking this into your way of building? I can hear at Velux they're already thinking about it, but especially somebody who's extracting different materials and putting it into mountains and all of these things, which for my nature ears does not sound that good. No. How are you going to do this if you're going to keep producing and taking materials from these places? Like, I have to ask questions about it because it sounds too good to be true for me, to be honest.
Can I answer that one?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Today, annually, 22 million tons of limestone are mined to produce calcium carbonate. That is not just causing an environmental problem when it comes to carbon dioxide, it causes biodiversity problem instead.
And a social problem as well.
So we have 200 million tons here possible that we can avoid them digging up the limestone instead. But this is an example of a circular process. And by adding in the carbon dioxide into the calcium, you suddenly produce this product. I would like to say, and end with there is a solution for the 1.5 and all other of the 9 planetary boundaries. If you saw the film from Sir Richard Attenborough together with Professor Johan Rockström this summer, they said that there's one thing that will solve all of them, and that's circular material flows. Today we are like 7% circular, but if you can really change the process in the society for real, and then sorry, you will not send any waste to me anymore. So we won't exist as a company.
You'll be out of a job.
And that's why we're developing solutions where we will become a raw material producer in a circular society. So yes, I truly believe we can reach the 1.5 and take care of the biodiversity problem and any other of the 9 planetary boundaries.
I know that Susanna Pedersen doesn't believe that we can reach the 1.5 degree.
I'm hoping, but certainly the facts in the emissions gap report say otherwise at the moment, but of course there could still be time. But one thing I would like to at least just throw out there about the Global South. Of course, Velux is buying offsets, all kinds of companies are doing various good things, but and you talked about circular economy of waste and so forth. UNEP DTU, we have worked in close to 100 countries, looked at technology needs assessments for green transition in these countries, and also technology transfer issues. And if you take solar PV as an example, many, African countries have, of course, very conducive environments for solar power. But the fact is that a lot of the solar power investments that have been made in Africa, for instance, have not really led to any local manufacturing. It's not led to very much locally trained staff. And our center is right now producing research reports also saying that the e-waste, the solar PV waste that is now piling up in countries like Kenya is outrageous. It's like looking at the plastic, the challenge you see in the oceans. I mean, you see piles and piles of old solar PV equipment lying everywhere. And, we are certainly not probably good enough at looking at the circular, let's say, economy around things, and producer responsibilities and unknown, let's say, in many countries. And we have lots of good technologies in the Nordics. I absolutely respect that. I worked as a Nordic director for many years. I enjoy what we do here, but there are challenges in the Global South, and we are not helping necessarily.
But are you saying that we should not export solar panels to
I think
Africa,
we should export, but we should also take a responsibility for trying to at least make sure that some of the benefits go to the local countries as well in
You're
terms
getting
of
applause,
manufacturing and so forth. So.
Carl Bäckström.
Is this one working now?
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
okay, I keep with this one. No, we're talking about a lot about technological new solutions and circularity, but when it's about circularity, it's also about behavior, I would say, and I think that's where architecture can play a role also, and urban design. We have been discussing cities earlier today, and there I really believe that an initiative like the EU Commission launched last year on a new European Bauhaus. I mention this because I think it's very, very important. And that is also encouraging us all to work very transdisciplinary on those issues. It's not one of our disciplines that can solve something. We need to do it together. And it's also about involving everyone into the new green transition, or whatever we call it. And there I think something has started, and the interesting thing with this is that it was an initiative that was launched on, you could say, the very top, if you called Ursula von der Leyen on the top, but it's really addressing and starting to work with everyone to decide what it should be all about. So
and in what way can it be an advantage from the circular point of view?
Yeah, it addresses, I mean, not only then technological things, a lot about the behavioral things, because I think to become a circular economy, it's about how we behave a lot. And then in order to manage that, we all need to be included in that discussion. I mean, someone cannot say how you should behave. We need to understand this is really what benefits my way of living.
Cool. Yeah. And then Emma.
Yeah, regarding the European Bauhaus, I think I totally agree. It's a fantastic idea, and what is needed in that sense is that the industry in the value chain in the construction sector work together, and we identify how we should work together in order to optimize the buildings, because we can do a lot today without changing very much on the design of products and solutions, but we can optimize our buildings, and there we can reduce the carbon emission. And then in areas where there are used very heavy carbon contented materials, we can probably replace them with some better materials, and then we can reduce the amount of material also. So yes, the Bauhaus is a very good idea to work with. And then I would like to say that that Velux is not offsetting.
Okay, sorry.
I would like to mention offsetting is when you pollute and then you pay back. But what we are doing is that we look back and said what has happened in the past, and then we pay that back. That is not offsetting.
Yeah.
That is something completely different. I would like to mention that.
How come it's completely different? Sorry.
Because when we have set our SBTi targets, we have said we will be carbon neutral. So there's no offset.
No.
There's no offset. If you're carbon neutral, there's no offset.
Emma.
Well, interesting. Like to see that, how that works out, and how you make that. But I would like to say two things. For one, I think Susanne, she raised a super important point, which is just and fair transition. Because that is the biggest issue, and probably one of the biggest topics of this COP as well, is how are we actually going to help other countries be able to make a green transition. And for me, I see that that is one of the responsibilities that you as companies actually have, is to help move that green transition along, especially if you're importing products and importing things from areas that are vulnerable. Like, that's a big issue right now in these areas. There's a lot, especially in Africa. There are countries where there's huge issues with jobs for young people. There's not any kind of sustainable future they can look forward to. There's nothing there for them to make them stay there. And that's a big issue and something we work a lot with as youth delegates. But then I have another thing, which is what we haven't, I think we've heard a bit about circular economy, but right now, like the trash problem, and even in Denmark and in Sweden, and we love to be really clear and clean, and we have this, people say that we are really good at sorting our trash. We're absolutely horrible. I think out of the the sorted plastic, it's less than 10% that's actually reused in Denmark. The rest of it gets burned and it gets used to power our houses, or we sell it to other countries. And the rest of that plastic, slagger and so on, is used all over Denmark in buildings in a really horrible way that's also polluting. I've seen a lot of the cases when I worked in a Danish NGO. How are you going to solve this plastic issue? And all of the litter from all the different buildings, because it's a huge issue right now, and we really don't have any way of doing it.
It's a question for Per, right? You
It's
work
a
with
question
recycling.
for everyone who's using any kind of resource that has to go out somewhere, and we have no idea of regulating and reusing it right now.
But Per, you work
Yes.
with recycling.
Let me take it to Ragn-Sells Denmark then. We have developed a solution there where we will, out of the household waste, out of the waste that comes from the different grocery stores, separate all the different materials. And I agree, in Denmark, it's very poor sorting. So we have a lot of plastics in what we need to sort out. But here we have developed a method where we can then granulate the plastic, clean it, sort it, granulate it, and bring it back as new material. So we're now producing new material for what has been plastic before. And we are together with the Minister of Environment in Denmark, running how we can have a recycling quota. So when companies are producing, they need to buy recirculated plastics, so we can take away the plastics. So I would like to collaborate with you here. This is a key thing.
But the new products that you're producing, can they be recycled?
We doesn't produce any products. We produce raw material.
But the new materials, can they be recycled afterwards when they've been used?
That is the intention. So I don't want these windows anymore because it will be produced in a way that they can be used over and over again. Exactly how we will do that in the future, we need to come back to. And that's the same. When you produce a plastic, if you can keep the material as clean as possible, then it will be able to be used over and over again. But the problem now is the standards are not there. We have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 types of plastics, and then suddenly it becomes a problem. So standardization must be there, procurement need to be in place so that you use this type. Then it can be recirculated back over and over again.
That kind of sounds like regulation.
It does sound regulation, but not punishment, not taxes.
Okay,
You can have a carrot instead of a stick.
That sounds like the Swedish Corona policy.
Yeah,
worked out well.
I shouldn't comment that one.
No, that's right. I'm wondering, after the whole COP, will you be even more forthright and more, I'm not saying you're angry, but a bit frustrated, okay? Will you be even more frustrated then, do you think, or do you think you'll walk out of here just, well, yes, we did it, yeah?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I think how things are going now, it looks positive-ish, but I also have low expectations, so that's probably a really smart way of looking at it. But I would say overall, I think it's going well. Let's see what happens the next 10 days. For me, I just really want something to happen on loss and damages. I feel like that's the biggest issue
Loss and
right now.
damages, what does that mean?
It means that the countries of the Paris article actually have to say that they were responsible for some of the losses and damages that they have put onto the rest of the world because of the carbon.
It's payback time.
Exactly. But that's probably the thing that most countries are least willing to do, because then you open up a Pandora's box of responsibility and money. But it's so important, because how are we ever going to make a country like Sierra Leone or anyone make them go through the green transition when they cannot have the funding or the infrastructure, anything to it? So that's what I want. And I'm sorry if I was a bit sharp here.
No.
Because when I talk
great,
to big
superb.
companies and they tell me about, we've innovated this, we've innovated this, we've innovated this, I just have to ask questions to it because I really want to understand it. And big words can also sometimes make you think about other things than what I was actually asking. So, but I believe you three are doing the right thing.
What are your hopes for COP26, Cod?
I do say, looking back at, I was at one COP in Paris also before, and it was a lot of discussion on cities, and I think it took a start there with persons like Anne Hidalgo from Paris, and you have seen
15-minute city woman.
and we have seen a lot happening since then. I hope it will be even more discussions on that after this COP, because we need to, much of the cities, as we heard, we are growing with one in New York. What did you say? Every month. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we definitely need to work on those, and the construction industry as a whole need to rethink itself somehow, and we as architects play one role in that. But coming back to this, we need to do it together.
Yes.
And I think meetings like this, yes, they are. It's a place where we can discuss, we can meet, and we are not only meeting in the Nordics, we're also meeting people from other parts of the world. And I'm coming back to that. I think we have things to learn in the South.
100%.
I mean, a lot to learn, and it plays an important role, and I hope it will. We will not come up with the solutions here, but we will set some sort of the targets, the goals, but also meet build new alliances, because that's also very important to challenge ourselves somehow. Thank you.
Kurt, what do you expect? What do you hope for?
If I should, my wish would be that we continue from Paris, and it's 5 years since Paris, or 6 years, but it's 5 COPs since Paris, and the governments have made their NDCs, and they shall update those. And my wish is that they are being updated in a very ambitious way, but I'm afraid they will not. When it comes to constructions, I would say I will hope that the governments will update their NDCs in a way that there's much more focus on constructions than there has been in the past, because we can do a lot of things within the construction. Then I hope that the people who are together here in the blue zone will learn from each other and be inspired from each other. And I know that next week there's a lot of CEOs coming down. Our CEO is also coming here next week, and I hope that he will be inspired by all the other companies that he will meet, and be inspired on how should we work, but also that he will inspire others about how we could work together. And then finally, we have a zero plastic strategy, and we want to be 100% recyclable in all our packaging. So the things you are asking for, I think some companies have already done it, but here we are talking to the companies who have changed themselves. It is all the companies who are not here we should speak to.
Exactly.
Carl mentioned early on why White is doing what you're doing, because your owners, that means the architects, the engineers within your company want it. But in your case, is it just individual interest in this issue that has forwarded your to that position that you are today? Huh?
We are a family-owned company. Third generation, the fourth generation are pushing the environmental things even more. We want to stay as a company for generations to come. So it might sound like a fairy tale, but it's in the DNA of our company.
Okay.
It is part of the root of the company. We want to do that. And my expectation for the COP is that make sure that we can showcase that it's possible to do things. So we will have in total 13 sessions where we demonstrate different material flows that can be created, and we have someone that would like to do that. One will be next Thursday about fair plastics. So if anybody is listening here from Denmark, if you're producing products based on plastics, you should always then make sure that you procure fair plastics, not virgin produced.
And why this interest?
I could echo this. It's a part of the DNA. It's a family-owned company. And the owners has always had an ambition to be a model company and to be a model for others. And we have had that since 1965, so there's nothing new. That's exactly where it's the DNA. So yes, and then we can afford it. And I think it's a different situation if you are a company on the stock. There you probably have some other owners, and it could be a kind of a challenge there. But for us, it's a challenge, but it's also a part of the DNA, so it's something we need to do. And if the future requested.
It's a good selling point too, right?
It is a selling point, but it's not the only selling point. It is
Now-
something that you have to do.
I really believe that we're going to make a huge amount of money in the future because we will have this transformation. And we have already invented the solutions that are needed in the future society. So I really hope we make a lot of money. The money will be spent in new research and development, of course, also. But we are right positioned.
Susanne, final words.
Well, I think I'm a believer in both technology development, regulatory target setting, and also, let's say, mobilizing the green finance needed. But I would really like to see a race to the top coming out of COP, companies committing to more and more ambitious targets, showing that going green can mean business, but also that countries actually push one another to be at the front runner in this race. So a race to the top would really be nice.
But are you positive towards this tendency that we're seeing today that companies, the private sector, is setting the agenda? Or should this be the public sector?
Well, I think actually the private sector has really, let's say, driven a lot of the development in the past few years. So I think the private sector does play a big role. But of course, it's a big world out there. The population growth in many countries is tremendous. The run on resources is tremendous, etc. So it's also very difficult for some countries to actually go green. So we need to pull our efforts together to help and also commit and transfer the funding that we've promised the emerging economies and the developing world as well.
Pull up your socks. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists.
Thanks.
Superb.
Thanks.